When you think of a successful adventuring party, you probably think of fame, wealth, and glory. Well, knowing some adventures is probably more infamy than glory, but either way, the party starts to establish a reputation within the game world. Players like doing cool stuff and getting cool rewards for it. The wealth aspect of the game is pretty obvious and explicit in our different dragon games. They get gold, magic items, and other valuable objects to use. But what about reputation? I feel like this one's a little bit easier to neglect because we don't really have a physical manifestation of reputation or a mechanically defined process for it like we do in terms of handing out gold and magic items. Hi, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall. Today we're talking about how to use your party's reputation and use it to guide your game going forward. By their nature, adventurers do bold and bombastic deeds, and some of them even live to tell the tale about it. These stories, these adventures that define them are stuff of legend, of myth. Adventurers become well known because of their quests and their actions throughout the campaign setting. These actions are what form the basis of the party's renown, their reputation. As a game master, this is really great stuff because we can use the party's past actions to help guide the future of the game. When the party takes actions in your game world, it's your job to adjudicate the outcomes and the consequences of those actions. Part of the consequences is the reputation that the party builds up from those past deeds. Now, of course, consequences could be both good or bad or neutral, just like the party's actions could be heroic, infamous, or somewhere in between. So if we can keep track of these past deeds that the party has done, then we can use them to help inform future consequences of the game. And we can use these in a multitude of ways, but a few examples would be potential patrons, contacts, hooks or rumors that the party might receive due to their reputation, enemies that the players could make due to their reputation, hirelings, retainers, mercenaries, or specialists the players may wish to recruit could react differently based off of the party's renown, and even random encounters the players have within your game world could be altered based on if the NPC knows something about the party's reputation. To successfully implement this idea of reputation, we're going to need some procedural mechanics to help figure out how exactly the party's renown is going to come into play. But before we get to that, did you know you could help improve my reputation by hitting the like button and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this in the future? Before we dive into the mechanics, I wanted to give a shout out to Merc Dice for his blog post about honor tables and Luke Gearing about his blog post for reputation tables. Both were inspirations for this video, and we'll be using a slightly modified version of Luke Gearing's rules for this video, so credit where credit is due. I'll leave links to both blog posts in the video description. Check them out if you're interested. Okay, so how do we implement mechanics for reputation and renown? Well, like so many other good procedures in TTRPGs, we're going to use a dice table, or multiple dice tables if you prefer. In his blog post, Luke talks about starting with a blank table and then adding entries into it as the players do notable deeds. Now here we have our first decision to make. What kind of table do we want it to be? You could use something like a D20 table or a D10 table if you'd like. In that case, your minimum granularity is going to be a 5% or 10% chance respectively, which is okay. But I'm going to propose that we use a D100 table, and I have reasons for this that we'll get to in a minute. In this case, I like to make each entry a 2% chance. However, based on the deed, you can increase that and put the same entry multiple times in your table if it's worthy to be well known across the land. So let's say the party defeats a group of bandits. A stout and worthy deed, so we'll assign it an 8% probability and add it to our table. Then later, let's say the party defeats a goblin chieftain and his band that is harassing a nearby town. We'll give that a 16% probability because the town is somewhat notable. Then later they help a minor merchant that's in a bind, lesser known, so we'll give that only a 4% probability. Okay, now notice here that their reputation score only occupies 28% of our D100 table so far. And that's okay. Our adventurers are just getting started in the world, so they probably aren't that well known yet, so there's less likely of a chance that their reputation is going to come into play so far. All right, based on the table that we built, let's take a look at a quick example. Let's say the party have a random encounter with a group of pilgrims on the road. Would the pilgrims recognize our party? Time to make a roll on our reputation table. If we roll a 28 or under, we'll reference our table to see what deed the pilgrims have heard of. If we roll above that, they do not know the party. If they don't know the party, we can make a reaction roll as normal and just proceed from there as usual. But if they do know the party, we'll reference the reputational event and the die roll. If the die roll comes up even, then the NPC views the party favorably for that deed on the table. If the die roll comes up odd, then they are dissatisfied with the party based on their past act. This is why I like to assign those 2% increments. That way we have one odd and one even number for each reputational clustering. And then you could, of course, multiply that however reputable you think the deed is. So as long as it's divisible by 2, you're good to go. So going back to our example, let's say we rolled a 25. Looking at our table, we see that they know about the party assisting the minor merchant, and they're displeased with that. Why? Well, now as a game master, this is where you have to improvise a reason. Perhaps the merchant is actively devout to a different god, or his actions have weakened the worship of their god in a certain area. Okay, so that's interesting. Now we have a little bit of context here, and from there we can make our reaction roll if we'd like and proceed with the encounter. Or if you think you have enough to go off of just from the reputation table, then great, you could skip the reaction roll if you want and get straight back to the fiction with your party. Now in this case, the pilgrims are displeased with the party, but unless they're religious zealots, they're probably not going to attack the party. Or if you made a really low reaction roll, then I guess they could attack the party too. They might be cold towards them or scold them for assisting this person that they don't like. But otherwise, your party is probably not going to get any valuable intel or assistance from these pilgrims. So that's kind of setting up the framing for this encounter. But it makes it a little bit more interesting because they are reacting to things that the players have done in the past. So once your party gets well known and established, your reputation table is going to fill up. Once it's full, you're still going to have new deeds you'd like to add to it. So what are you going to do? Well, I think you can do two different things here. First option is to delete the oldest entries to free up the space that you'd require. This is probably the simplest way to do it from a list management perspective, but it doesn't necessarily feel the most satisfactory. Hercules' first labor is the defeat of the Nemean lion, but it's still probably one of his more well-known deeds from the 12 labors of Hercules. If we remove that one from our reputation, we never have anyone recognize Hercules for the defeat of the lion. Does that make sense? Probably not. Before we discuss the second method, if you do use this first method, just be sure to keep track of what your oldest deed is once you've cycled back around to the beginning of your table. You could have a date added column to keep track, or you could push everything up and add your newest entries to the bottom of the table. But this could be a bit of a pain to readjust all of those percentages if you're doing it manually. Okay, so the second option here is to cull your lesser deeds from the table and recalibrate the older ones. Saving that minor merchant probably isn't the most important deed in the grand scheme of things, so we could drop that deed to free up space for newer and bigger reputable deeds that the party becomes known for later on in their adventuring careers. Additionally, you can also pare back the percentage chance for any of our existing deeds to make way for new ones. So maybe that defeat of the goblin chieftain drops from 16% to 6%, and now you've freed up 10% to allocate elsewhere in your table. A couple of final notes on the mechanics of reputation tables. You might want to leave a portion of the table blank. So there's a chance that the NPC has never heard of the party. You could make it something like 20%, 30%, whatever you'd like. It's up to you. You could also just make the call that certain NPCs would or would not have heard of the party before, and then either use the table or forgo it in that situation. You could make a separate die roll, maybe roll a d6, and 1 through 4 you use the reputation table, and on a 5 or 6 they've never heard of the party, something like that. But that starts to add a bit more dice rolls and can get a little bit convoluted in your situational prep, so just be aware of that. Secondly, Luke calls out in his blog post that you could have different tables for different regions of your game world or for different factions and so on. This could work well to have your party's reputation feel a bit more localized. In my games, I tend to keep my sandboxes pretty regional anyway. So personally, I think I'm going to stick to a single table. But if you've done something similar to this in the past and used multiple tables, let us know in the comments how that worked out for you. So that's really it. Like I said, you can roll on these reputation tables for random encounters to provide some context for them. You could use it when the party is trying to find hirelings. Maybe the party gets a better deal because the hireling thinks highly of them and has heard of their past deeds. Or you could have NPCs come to the party with different requests or possible adventure hooks because they've heard of the party from fill in the blank. In this case, I'd probably eschew that odd even aspect of the die roll, especially if they're actively seeking the party's assistance. They probably think highly of them. And you could use the tables to generate new antagonistic groups based on your party's past deeds. Maybe a group of bugbears hears that an adventuring party has slain their goblin chieftain friend. Well, now they come looking for revenge. So you get the idea. I think that reputation tables are a really nice way to incorporate the party's past deeds into setting the future direction of the game. Or they at least help serve as reminders that the world is reacting to what the players have done. And that's cool. You want the party to change the game world around them, and they get excited to see how the NPCs react when these things are happening, or they recognize the party from their past adventures and actions within the campaign. And what I think I love most about the randomized aspect of the tables is that it helps keep things fresh and unexpected for me, the game master, which is always a plus in my book. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe. Consider checking out Enchanted Nimbus, my monthly newsletter. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.